Hello dear World of Warcraft friends, welcome back to a new video on my channel. By the way, I noticed that every time I record a video, within the first 10 seconds, I always slide up in my chair. Don't ask me why, it's just a habit. In this video, we're going to take a look at how the class tuning from Wednesday has affected the individual specs. As we knew or know, 10 classes received tuning changes. Resto Druid was included, Preservation Evoker, Retribution Paladin, the 3 Warlock specs, Warrior, well, 2 specs, Monk was included, and yeah. In the meantime, clever people have used sims to figure out how much more damage your class does now, and that's what we want to take a look at. I can already tell you, if you play Retribution Paladin or Warlock, you're doing really well. That should shake things up quite a bit, and with that, let's get started. I would really appreciate it if you leave a like and feel free to subscribe. It's free and it helps me out. And with that, let's get started. You can see up here on the top left, these are the current calculations. There's another class added to it, that's Frost Decay, and everything is organized with single target on the left and AoE on the right. In this case, everything was simulated with raid bots. I've already shown you how all of this works. Here you download the Simulation Craft add-on, enter your string here, and then go to raidbots.com with it, and you can simulate it there. And people have tested, okay, with these changes, how much more damage does my spec do now? For Frost Decay, it's also pretty decent. 7 in single target and 6 in AoE. So you can definitely play that, expect a decent boost. Havoc Demon Hunter gets about 2.7% each. And as I already said, I actually think the spec itself isn't bad at all in groups. That should have a pretty good effect now as well. Vengeance Demon Hunter is a different story, because that's not a buff for damage. If you open this details panel, it always says what it does. It depends on how much gear you have. And it also says here that you get about 2.5 to 3.5 extra armor with it. So that's purely defensive. Resto Druid and the Preservation Evoker get to 3% and 2% respectively. But you have to note here, this only applies to damage, not healing. So if you say, okay, I can't manage to do damage while healing, then this is probably irrelevant for you, but we know that especially in hierarchies, it's important for the healer to contribute some damage as well. And both of these specs are definitely catching up a bit in that regard. Next, we have the Beastmaster Hunter. And there it was mainly about cleave damage. So your pets now deal more damage with these beast cleave. In general, we're talking about 4 to 10% more multi-target damage here. And here it also says that this applies to low target situations, 4%, and for high target situations, it's more like 10%. Survival Hunter, both in single target and multi-target, 3.6%. And then we have the Frost Mage. Here too, Blizzard said it's purely about the AoE damage or cleave damage. Accordingly, no increase in single target, but about 2 to 3% in multi-target. I think it gets interesting with the Brewmaster Monk, because at least from what I've seen so far when I've been healing, they're already doing pretty well, also in terms of damage. And now they're getting 2.3% more single target on top of that. Plus about another 2.7% in AoE. Will that be enough in the end? Will the Brewmaster become the new top S tier gigatank? You can't say that yet. We'll have to wait and see how the keys play out first. Until we have more data, but it definitely shouldn't be a bad thing. One of the biggest beneficiaries is the Retribution Paladin. 5% in single target, 3 to 8% in multi-target. But you have to say here, just because you log in doesn't mean you immediately get this damage gain, because the whole thing is tied to your 4-piece tier set. That means if you don't have the 4-piece bonus, you also won't do more damage. That's why I'd say you probably won't see much impact on Retribution in the logs and rankings at first, because not many players have the 4-piece set yet. But in 2 or 3 weeks at the latest, this buff should really kick in. And I think Retribution should be pretty good. But then the number one in these DPS simulations in terms of gain is Warlock. Affliction Warlock comes in at 9% in single target and 6 to 7% in AoE, so that's already a decent buff here. Demo Warlock is the class that gained the most, 12% in single target and 10% in AoE. And we had already seen in some cases that Warlocks weren't doing badly at all in the rankings and logs. So I assume that we'll have at least one Warlock spec that will really dominate the season from now on. I'm very sure about that. Which one it will be in the end, we'll have to see. But it looks pretty good for now, especially since Destro also got a buff. However, this only affected Rain of Fire. That's 30 more damage on top of it. Here they say it's a small buff in AoE. I'd say it also depends on which content we're talking about here. With a, I don't know, 2-target raid cleave boss where you don't use Rain of Fire, or maybe only twice in the fight, it's really minimal. In Mythic Plus dungeons, where you use Rain of Fire much more often, this will definitely give you a boost. So it's really fight dependent, and the fact that they didn't put any percentages here, maybe it was just super hard to simulate. But I would say that in Mythic Plus, it's probably more than just a small buff, because I think of a small buff as like 0.1%, and I can't imagine that it will be that little. And last but not least, we have the Prot Warrior here, 0.0%. But that's pretty logical, because it wasn't the damage that got buffed, it was just the defense against magic damage. In the future, you can take 2 less damage from that. And of course, that doesn't affect the damage you deal. But yes, we'll keep an eye on how it all looks in the logs. What do you think? Which class do you think definitely still needs a buff? Feel free to write it in the comments. And with that, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Have a good time. Take care.